In 1980, there were over 400 cars produced with a manual. Yet, in 2026, there's only going to be 30. 2026 is coming. It's coming fast. We've made a lot of improvements on life and living all across the world. Seeing AI become a common and real thing was one of the biggest ones for me. I'd always dreamed of AI being real as a kid because, well, I'm a sci-fi junkie. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. We're here to talk about something that is near and dear to all of us. That's cars. Cars have been around for nearly 150 years. They're not going anywhere, at least not anytime soon. But they're changing. When the first car came out, the only way to drive one was with a stick, some pedals, and a weird-looking windy tool that would crank it up for you. But people wanted more from it. We always wanted to make them bigger, faster, cheaper, and more stylish. But somewhere along the way, we lost what makes cars cars. Cars became less about passion, less about style, and more about the price. That's okay, though, is what I'd like to say. But I feel like there's a spirit that's being suffocated and shoved into a closet in order to make that line of the graph go up and the other line go down. I'm talking about price compared to passion. All across history, cars have had a passion, a soul, a fire that you can see in the creator's eyes. It's been too long since I've seen that. I no longer get excited when I look at production cars. I just can't help it but feel sad. And it's over one statistic. One little stat that people my age overlook. The manual transmission. Now I know I said a lot here, but it all goes back to that passion. I'm only 20 years old, so I haven't seen a lot of the golden years of cars when they were fresh out the box. I mean, when the first Fast and Furious movie came out, I wasn't even born yet. But I still get this sense of nostalgia when I see it, or when I watch it, or see cars from that era, and even from 20 years before that. In 1980, there were well over 400 production cars that came with a manual transmission. That's because companies knew their customers wanted a chance to save a couple bucks on skipping the auto and get the cheaper, easier, and more reliable manual. But going into 2026, there is only going to be 30 cars produced with a manual option. And I bet you can guess around 10 to 20 of them. In just 20 years, we've shaved the idea of a manual out of people's heads. And I know others have talked about this, people double my age, people who have lived it, and have to watch as some of their favorite cars get stripped of what makes them an extension of the self. Ever since I was young, I've always wanted a C4 Corvette, because to me, it was the staple of American auto history. I mean, it's the oldest car produced to date. And that's a lot of history, and a lot of love, a lot of passion, a lot of fire, and a lot of soul. But since the year 2020, the Corvette no longer has a manual option. And I'll be honest, I don't like new cars. The newest car I've owned and still own is a 2013 Mazda 3. But my first car, was an '04 Buick LeSabre. And regrettably, none of the cars I've owned have been a manual. I'm embarrassed to admit that, being a car guy, but it has to be said because it aches my heart to not have one. Now, I've driven stick and I adore it, but I can't afford one and it kills me. But what kills me more is to see a staple of automotive history get pulled off the list of cars that are being made with a manual. I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but there's a point to all this. And that coming soon, I can see the total death of the manual transmission. And that's a future I'm scared of. In 20 or 30 years, when I have kids that can drive, and I think about how can I be excited to go shopping for their first car if they don't have the chance to get a $5,000 Honda from 10 years ago with a manual option. I'm sure the Honda Civic Si will still be around, but do I really want that to be their only option? If they want to have a true driver experience? Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you why the manual is dying, but it's because nobody wants them anymore, except this small group of car guys and gals left in the world. And the companies don't need to pander to the enthusiasts anymore because a car isn't a toy. It never really was, but it's more of an appliance for people now. Sure, we deem it a toy, but people still need a daily driver. Now, I'm not saying the automatic should be killed off. I mean, I just did a 10-hour drive to New Jersey and I couldn't help but think that driving through Philly with a manual would be hell on earth. But at the same time, I would have been more alert and more in tune with my surroundings. I don't want to just press the button to make the car go forwards And I especially don't want a near 500 horsepower Corvette to have a let's go fast when I press down button. But that's dangerous for the everyday driver. So I say that, but car accidents and fatalities have only ever gone down in stats ever since their creation. But that's a lot of power behind one easy action of just pushing your foot down, watching the little arms on the dials go up. After saying all that, finally going to go into my points. I'm sorry for rambling, but I need to get that off my chest and to clear my mind to talk about why the manual is dying and why I think we're nearing a crux of total manual death.
But slip behind the wheel of a new power-style Chrysler and get the whole story for yourself. Just be prepared to make the switch to Chrysler, because I promise you, 15 minutes here can change 15 years of habits. Why not stop in at your Chrysler dealers tomorrow? Take the keys and see what driving pleasure really is.
Before the first true manual transmission was made in 1894 by the French, cars worked on a single-speed belt system. But two guys named Émile Levasseur and Louis-René Panhard created a simple 3-speed setup. And the moment it was out, people ate it up. If you bought a car, it always had to be a 3-speed setup, and it was loved. You could go faster and feel cooler in the machine you just bought. I'm sure it was a crazy flex back then when it first came out, just being like, haha, yeah, finally, something good came from France. Check it out, 3 gears. I didn't even think an automobile could get faster. Look at me now, I'm going 45 miles an hour. The manual was used in everything until about 1940, when General Motors came out with the Hydra-Matic, the first mass-produced automatic transmission, and they put it in their luxury models, the Oldsmobile. It became a sign of wealth to not have to reach down for the shifter more than once. And if you couldn't afford an automatic, then you were just one of the commoners who would only ever drive a manual. Now, that wasn't the start of the issue, because the automatic wouldn't become mass-marketed till about 1960 when they started getting cheaper and easier to make. And from there, it just scaled. Now, the manual was still the prominent transmission to use. I mean, it was in NASCAR, F1, Rally, anything that had 4 wheels was probably a manual. I mean, even motorcycles still use manual transmissions. But until 1980 to the 2000s, the automatic wasn't affordable for the everyday man. But it wasn't a popularity contest, because by then you could buy either or. It was a pretty even choice. The two lived in unison due to the worldwide love of racing and hearing the roar of an engine, and being in total control of the car you bought and the car you loved. Plus, it was still cheaper to buy a manual over an auto, so what the hell, why wouldn't you buy the manual one? In 1980, there were over 400 cars in production with a manual option. That's because, for decades, manuals weren't a niche. They were the default. People still called it the standard instead of the manual. But if you bought a car in the 60s or 70s, odds were you were rowing your own gears. But by 2000, when automatics became just as cheap and fuel efficient, possibly even more fuel efficient, the manual started slipping, down to about 25% of sales in the 80s and 90s. Manuals weren't just transportation, they were culture. You saw them in NASCAR, rally racing, and in the movies. Even video games like Gran Turismo or any arcade racer gave a whole generation that the idea of shifting gears was part of being a driver. And that's why it hurts even more to see the number collapse today. From hundreds of manual-equipped cars in the 80s to only about 30 left by 2026. So focusing in on the numbers previously said, in the 80s and 90s, manuals made up roughly 30 to 40% of all car sales. And that's because it was what was known. And the automotive companies were working on finding a way to make the automatic cheaper, because there was a storm on the horizon. The bubble was about to burst, and the world was about to get expensive. In 2008, the economy across the world crashed, and it crashed hard. It was impossible to not be affected by that, and even the companies felt that. And companies were still trying to recover from the 70s oil crisis that tore at emissions regulations and hit a lot of them hard. So it was time to trim the fat. They realized it was getting harder to make a manual car that hit emission standards and budget every year. So they almost killed it. The technology was finally there to put an automatic into a car for a fraction of the R&D and production cost. So they all went for it. By the time these cars were getting put out for sale worldwide, the new generation of drivers was out there and looking to buy. Millennials looking to buy their first car that wasn't from a random yard or a used car lot were into the new production cars and didn't mind that it was an auto because, well, it was their first new car, so they wanted all the bells and whistles. Now, I went out and asked a few of my friends their opinions on purchasing a new car, and I'll just play the interviews right now. How many of you know how to drive a manual?
Okay. So I've never driven one like personally, but I feel like I could figure it out pretty damn easy.
All right.
Yeah.
Driven a manual lawnmower.
Okay, would you,
Well,
if
I've
you,
driven manual ATVs if that counts. So
it's pretty close, but thinking strictly cars, would you, if you were to go out and buy a new car tomorrow, would
No.
you be more inclined to purchase a manual over an automatic?
that really depends.
I'd get an automatic.
I would probably get an automatic though. I'm not gonna lie.
Xavier, what
I mean,
about
I
you?
like to have a manual just to have
Because like if
it,
I'm
you know
going
what
for
I'm
like
saying?
an everyday drive, like just something I'm gonna drive like to work, I'm just gonna go with the automatic.
Right, right.
But if
Okay,
it's something
Like,
that's
there's no
like more
point in doing all
like
that extra stuff.
yeah, but if it's something I'm more like driving for like leisure, you know, I'm probably gonna get a manual.
so I know
That's
I
that-
know you're in the market for a new car right now. Would you be more, if you knew how to drive a manual, would you be more inclined to purchase a manual car? You're walking the lot and you walk up on two identical Honda Civics. One's a manual, one's an automatic. Same price point. Which one would you get?
If I knew how to drive a manual,
Yes.
a manual,
A manual? Why?
because I'm pretty sure there's gas benefit. To save gas, not wasting.
Wasn't
No,
it,
they're actually
disproven?
less fuel efficient.
Oh,
Yeah.
Automatics have hit a peak currently of being more fuel efficient and cheaper to purchase from the factory.
Well, then, no, I'm taking the automatic. I
Interesting.
value gas efficient.
Interesting. Okay. Okay,
Does
thank
this,
you.
like, relate to you in some way? Just wondering.
Curious. I don't know, Xavier. When I told you I'm writing an essay right now and then I have questions to ask you, maybe they might be related to the damn essay.
Yeah, check
Well,
it out.
I didn't hear the. I just knew you were like writing an essay, but I think they were like, okay, whatever, man.
I love you, buddy.
Whatever. I just thought like, oh, he's just asked like, if you were to go buy a car tomorrow, it should be like an automatic or a manual. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool, yeah.
Yeah, if you,
Yeah.
Xavier, this is a good question for you. Let's say you finally save up enough money to go to the car dealership and you're going to buy your first car. Which one would you want to buy first?
Probably the automatic. Like a manual's cool and everything, but like, would I actually be using that for like everyday use?
Would you?
Mo.
If you were able to use it every day, would you? All right, well, thank you.
About gas prices, yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. These answered my questions very well. Anybody have
Uh,
anybody have any ending remarks to add?
I think you
Would you be down to
suck.
play Siege with us after you're done with your video essay?
Yes, Xavier, I'll get on Siege with you guys after I'm done with the video essay.
I start clapping my
Hey.
belly like a seal.
Oh, actually, one last question. Do you guys feel as if well, there might be two questions to this, actually. Would you feel as if men are more inclined to purchase a manual than a woman?
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably.
I'm going to take Drew's resounding silence as yes.
That's like saying, would you rather have
I'm
a
muted
dinosaur?
because of the background.
Oh, okay. And final question. Do you feel as if manual cars are advertised more towards men than females?
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
100%?
Because
Definitely,
it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because it's like, you know,
Like
like
every
you
car
think
is.
manual cars. I don't know. When I think of manual cars, I think of like American Muscle, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of
Yeah, I
more
think of people
masculine.
driving on a dirt road for no reason.
yeah, and fucking crying and flipping their car and landing in a tree.
All right, well, thank you. Those are perfect.
You're welcome.
I'd have to say, after all that, I agree with them. Now, I asked the final question because I was on a phone call with one of my friends, and she said she feels less inclined to purchase a manual because she feels as if it's a manly thing. And she feels a stigma that women that drive a manual are attempting to pose and overcompensate. Personally, I've never thought of it from that angle because I don't assign a lot of things to specific genders. but she opened a new angle for me to check out, because that was a really interesting way to look at it. So, focusing on the stigma, I'm going to read an excerpt from one of my friends that she sent me when I asked her, do you feel as if cars are more marketed towards men, and do you feel as if manual transmissions are more of a manly thing, less than just a car thing? And she replied with this. Yes, I do feel that cars are marketed more towards men. For a long time, women have often been pushed to the back burner when it comes to areas that are traditionally associated with a manly attitude, and cars are no exception. The car community is still largely shaped by masculine stereotypes, which makes it harder for women to feel welcome or taken seriously. When women try and learn about cars or show genuine interest, men want to either mansplain the subject to them or dismiss their curiosity altogether by saying that cars are simply not for women. On top of that, the media has reinforced the idea that the only acceptable way for women to be connected to cars is through objectification, like being portrayed in a bikini washing a car rather than being seen as knowledgeable drivers, mechanics, or enthusiasts. This kind of mindset that makes it clear that women have never truly been embraced by the car community in the same way men have. And as for manual transmission, they are often labeled as a manly thing, rather than just another part of driving. The assumption is that strength, skill, and control behind the wheel of a manual belong to men. Framing it as a masculine skill only deepens the idea that women are far from feeling that they belong in the car community. Now, I'm going to focus in on what she said there, coming up after my next couple of points. So there's another reason manuals are dying that doesn't get talked about as much: the way people see them. A stick shift doesn't just mean driving anymore. It carries a stereotype, and most of the time, that stereotype isn't flattering. Now, I have more footage from my interview with my friends, so I'm just going to play it right here.
What do you guys imagine whenever you picture a manual driver?
A dickhead.
Kind of a sleazy wet guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say douche. Not all manuals, but it's always a manual driver.
Oh,
Not
let
all
me
manual
find.
drivers.
I can get a picture. I can get a picture of what I
You
imagine.
get a picture. Okay, I'm ready. So, do you imagine like an older fella, or like a young high schooler that just bought like a clapped out Honda Civic?
It's
That's
like both.
Revving on the
It's honestly both. It's honestly both.
Interesting, because I don't know, as a car guy, I imagine like Paul Walker, like Vin Diesel, or like
Vin Diesel's the perfect guy.
yeah, I picture like
Definitely
autocross or
bald
racing
like
or
buzzed. Bald.
bald.
For older guys, yeah, bald or buzz.
Balding or buzzed.
Okay. Do you guys think about those like Infinity drivers?
Not really.
Not
When
really.
I think manual, I think like muscle. That's it. I
Like
don't
muscle.
Think anything else.
Okay. Yeah, what car comes to mind whenever I mention a manual?
Bird. Okay.
Probably a
Yeah, I guess.
probably BMW.
A BMW. Okay.
Uh,
Dickhead BMW
wagon.
Probably
driver.
because I used to know someone who drove a manual
wagon.
BMW, and they always posted themselves
Is it a wagon?
on the road
What's that?
speeding and
What's that
cutting up.
Subaru?
Oh, the
Oh,
Impreza
yeah.
wagon?
I think so.
Yeah, the Subaru Impreza wagon body.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those around.
Really? Oh, I guess they're making a comeback.
I say a lot of them,
Which-
but I've seen two, which is a lie in my eyes. Since I've gone
Yeah.
my entire life without seeing them.
Yeah, dude. Okay, cool, perfect. That's gonna go into the next section of the stigma behind driving a manual. Thank you. So let's talk about the first one, the hick car. People think of manuals as old rusty trucks, beaters from the 90s that barely run, or some loud farm vehicle that only works in the countryside. It's this idea that if you're still driving stick, you must be poor, stuck in the past, or just some redneck who refuses to move on. And the other one that my buddies were talking about was the aggressive driver, the aggressive car guy even. You know the type, the high school kid with a clapped out Honda Civic who thinks 2 downshifts in a row equal instant horsepower, or the middle-aged muscle car guy who revs at every red light just to prove a point. Half the time they're yelling,
Hey! That thing got a Hemi? Yeah.
while shaking their coffee at Cars and Coffee. Manuals in their hands become less about passion and more about ego. And I can't help but think that movies fed into this. Fast and Furious basically turned shifting gears into a personality trait. Every race was 5 unnecessary gear slams, and it made it look like being a real driver meant flexing on everyone. And pop culture took something that was about connection and skill and turned it into a cliche. Now when people hear manual, they don't think of craft or driving for joy, they think of that guy. The problem is, once those images stick in people's heads, they shape buying habits. Manuals are seen as the car of hicks, high school wannabe street racers, or middle-aged egos. Then, of course the general public avoids them. Nobody wants to be that guy at the stoplight, and companies know it. So another layer to the stigma is gender, like we were talking about previously. Somewhere along the way, driving stick became seen as a man's thing. And like I said, I didn't notice this until I asked one of my friends about buying a manual. And she straight up told me she wouldn't want one because she feels like people would think she's trying too hard to prove something. Like, it's only real men who can handle a clutch. And that honestly stopped me. I never thought about it that way. But when I look around, I see what she means. Manuals are advertised, shown, and talked about in predominantly male spaces. Car meets, YouTube builds, video games, racing. I mean, even the Fast and Furious movies, which shaped how my whole generation thinks about cars, always made the gear-shifting hero a guy. And there are women in those movies and automotive media who might drive, like Suki and even Mako in Initial D. But the manual flex went to the men. So you get this unspoken stereotype. If a guy drives a manual, he's passionate, tough, maybe even a little obnoxious. If a girl drives a manual, people act like she's trying to be one of the guys. Which, once again, I never noticed, because driving stick shouldn't be about gender at all. It's about loving cars, loving control, and loving the experience. And the thing is that stigma matters. If half the population already feels alienated from manuals before they even sit behind the wheel, that's a whole group of drivers companies know won't buy them. Automakers chase trends. If the trend says manual equals male niche, then it's easier to cut from the option entirely. The final note I want to dial in on from this section is the flip phone. My buddy MJ said it feels like owning a flip phone in the modern day, and he's not wrong. I've noticed it is just how outdated manuals look to young drivers. To a lot of people my age, a manual isn't cool, it's just extra work. Why suffer in stop-and-go traffic, riding a clutch on a hill, or worrying about stalling when the car can do it all for you? That's the thing. Stalling is seen as embarrassing. If you're learning stick and stall out at a light, everyone behind you is honking and it feels like the whole world's watching you fail at something an automatic makes effortless. For a generation raised on convenience, smartphones, apps, instant everything, the manual comes off as clunky and unnecessary. It's kind of like choosing to write a school paper on a typewriter in the age of iPads. Sure, it might feel authentic, maybe even satisfying, but most people just see it as outdated, and once something gets labeled old, inconvenient, or extra work, it's hard to change people's minds. That's the final nail in the coffin. Not that manuals are worse, but that people just don't see the point anymore. It helped put into perspective and solidify that fear that manual is dying. And people don't want to work with it anymore because, well, it's old, it's dirty, and it's only for certain people. Now, part of why the manual is fading isn't just nostalgia or stigma, it's also technology. Cars today are smarter, faster, and way more efficient than anything we grew up admiring. Automatics have gone from the clunky Hydromatic of the 40s to the dual-clutch gearboxes and CVTs that shift faster than really any human could, saving gas, reducing emissions, and making traffic a little less painful. Even the old-school muscle car is getting computers that can launch it better than we ever could on our own. Electric vehicles are another nail in the coffin for manuals. An EV doesn't need gears. One-speed transmissions can put 500 horsepower to the ground without ever letting the driver touch a clutch. Torque is instant, acceleration is linear, and there's no skill barrier. You either have the foot, or you don't. In that sense, the manual becomes a luxury skill instead of a necessity. Something you do for fun, not survival. And it's not just performance. Safety tech is taking over too. Lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitors, they all favor automatics because the car has to be in control at the right millisecond. Stalling in traffic, misshifting, or double clutching isn't just inconvenient anymore. It's considered a liability. The tech isn't trying to kill the joy, it's trying to save lives, save the earth, and make cars easier to use for everyone. But the side effect? The manual is slowly being written out of the story. So while we cling to Miatas, pony cars, Sylvias, and the occasional Porsche, the tech is moving forward whether we like it or not. The manual isn't extinct yet, but the ecosystem around it, buyers, regulations, and engineering priorities, is tilting in favor of convenience, automation, and electrification. In a world where shifting gears isn't necessary, and maybe soon it'll be impossible to find one fresh off the line, manuals are disappearing from most production cars. But they're far from extinct. Certain sport cars and legacy models still cling to the stick. The Porsche 911, the BMW M Series, the Mazda MX-5, and a few pony cars like the Mustang still have them around. These cars aren't just machines, they're statements. Owning a manual today is almost like wearing a badge of authenticity. It signals that you still care about skill, tradition, and pure joy of driving. In a world full of EVs, CVTs, and computers controlling everything, a manual sticks out. It's a reminder that driving can still be personal, tactile, and deliberate. And because they're rare, manuals in these cars often become collector's items, turning the experience of driving into a form of cultural capital for enthusiasts. It doesn't have to be for one gender or for one type of person. A manual is for everyone, and anyone who wants to drive. So I want to say this before I go to the next point. Cars aren't for women. They aren't for men either. They're for everyone. It's not something someone should feel ashamed about for trying to get into, and they shouldn't feel like they're in the wrong place. People are going to judge and critique, but that's part of life. So this goes out to all my people who are scared that just because they don't fit the stereotype, you do. Because the stereotype is you. So do what makes you happy. If you're a woman who wants to buy a Mustang, buy the Mustang. If you're a man who wants to drive a pink S2000 like Suki, because you want to do it, do it. And if you don't fit either of those, still go out and drive, because you want to. When you buy a car, you should buy it because it suits you, and it makes you happy. So go buy it. Dialing back in, focusing on the car guy culture. Please go beyond the dealerships. The manual survives in car culture. Car communities, track days, and autocross events are where manuals still reign. And the passion spreads from person to person. Kids learning from parents, friends teaching friends, instructors showing the ropes. This grassroots approach keeps the skill alive. Video games like Gran Turismo and Forza give a taste of the experience to younger generations who might never sit in a new manual. While YouTube builds, restorations, and vintage car coverage highlight the beauty and history of shifting your own gears. Manuals are more than just technology. They're a feeling, connection to the past, and a bridge between generations. They survive because people care enough to preserve the culture. Even as the wider market forgets what it once valued. Cars are an expression of the self, just as any hobby is, and just as any art form too. When you build a car, you're putting a side of yourself you want the world to see, hear, and feel. So, what do we need to do to keep the manual from getting added to the footnote of history forever? From the first car to the first transmission to the first computer, the culture has always been there. People want to go fast and people want to be cool. And you do that through cars. Manuals aren't just manual boxes with gears, oil, sensors, and links. They're passion, their love, their care, their skill, their connection. And to me, they're part of being human. In your day-to-day life, you have passion. You have love, you have skill. You have sensors and oil. We're all machines with different systems. And just like the appendix or the wisdom tooth, sure, it's out of date now, and the body doesn't need them, or really use them. Most of us still have them. You know, maybe that wasn't a good analogy, but you get my point. In the next couple of years, you're gonna find someone who doesn't know how to drive a manual. Don't be afraid of them damaging your car or damaging something, because I'm sure you all remember your first time stalling. I know I do. And just show them the love and the feeling you can experience driving a manual, even if it's just around the parking lot. At the end of the day, cars aren't just a hobby or an appliance, they're a feeling. The hum of engines, the rigidness of the road, you feel it all when you use a manual. I think experiencing those things can help you feel more human and more connected. In a world that's so connected, that we're disconnected. We need to step back and stop letting computers decide for us. We need to sit down, press the clutch in, and just get rolling. I say that on a hopeful note. I know I can't change the future of cars alone, but I can do my part to keep the memory of it alive. And so I leave you with a request. Love others indiscriminately, just as a car does. It doesn't matter who's behind the wheel, because at the end of the day, it's about learning and experiencing life. One day the clutch might just be a memory, but maybe, just maybe, we can still keep that connection alive. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had an amazing summer, and please share this to your friends in the hopes you guys can connect further and go out and buy a manual. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. I love you, and I hope you and I can stay connected.